StormLung's Curse by Marley Grim for the Moonset Gazette. The winds of fate were howling through Moonset like a chorus of banshees as I stepped onto the rain-slick cobbled streets, clutching an invitation to a rather macabre affair. Madam Wink, Moonset's resident oracle and architect of the arcane, she would be convening a midnight seance that very evening, and my name was on the guest list. Sure would be a shame to let the lady down. Even how I received the invitation was a mystery all its own. When I received the invite, it was the metallic creaking of the door's mail slot at the Gazette that got my attention. And getting up from my desk, I picked up this mysterious invite. Of course, no mention of a sender. I opened the door just in time to see the back of the delivery person vanish into the night. But before plumbing the depths of the supernatural, my path lay through the mundane. A visit to the Moonset Sundry, the very epicenter of local gossip and oddball merchandise, managed, of course, by old Judd, the kooky old bat with a penchant for the paranoid. The invitation's mysterious delivery was still gnawing at my curiosity, but Judd had the allure of a lantern in the fog tonight, perhaps promising a chance to shed some dim light on the town's recent dark and dirty deeds. The bell above the door jangled as I pushed into the store, a ring-ting-ting that contrasted sharply with the ominous rumbles from the darkening sky. Judd was perched behind the counter, his eyes darting around like a concerned animal as he rearranged items that no sane man would ever purchase. "Evening, Marley," he grunted, his voice a gravelly note under the rumbling tempest outside. "Storm's coming on strong. Makes the bones rattle and the shadows dance, doesn't it?" "Judd," I said, cutting to the chase as the wind played a dirge around the eaves, "about that body you found. What's been going on around here? And this, seance tonight?" He chuckled, a sound as dry as the dust on his shelves. "Oh, yes, the seance. Madam Wink's trying to stir the pot and see what ghost she can summon from the stew. But listen, Marley," he leaned in forward, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's not just ghosts in them woods. People go in, sure as the moon rises, but not all come wandering back. The forest has eyes, lad, and they ain't all human." His gaze flicked nervously to the windows, as if expecting the glass to burst in on us at any moment. "Folks talk of lights, strange lights deeper in the woods, where no honest man ought to tread after dark. They say the trees move and whisper secrets to those fool enough to listen." As I digested his words, the wind outside howled as though it were grieving the spirits of the damned. I walked by Judd's side as he went through the nightly routine of closing up shop. You see, the streets of Moonset were now shrouded in an uneasy twilight, shadows lengthening into spectral fingers. Tonight, under Madam Wink's eerie guidance, we would all dance with shadows. Judd flipped the sign on the door of Moonset Sundry to closed with an almost reverent slowness, and he beckoned me to join him to continue our hushed chat over a hot meal and cold drinks. We crossed the street to the local tavern, the Wailing Banshee, where local blues legend Big Show Charlie would often play. "Marley, you look like a man who could use something stronger than coffee to cut through the evening's chill," he said with a knowing twinkle in his eye that suggested the old geezer had more tales to tell. The storm's growl was growing fiercer by the minute, a cacophony of impending chaos conducted by unseen forces. And we crossed into the tavern, a place that smelled of old wood and spilled booze, its walls a testament to decades of mumbled conspiracies. Judd chose a booth towards the back, a strategic spot that allowed him a clear view of the door and, I suspected, any spectral visitors that might drift through the walls. Over plates of steaming food and mugs of cold beer, Judd leaned in, his voice dropping to a hushed murmur. You know, Marley, this town, it's like a beacon for weird things. Things you can see and can't see, and things you wish you never saw. Creep Street that runs right through the heart of Moonset, it's more than just a road. It's like a runway for all manner of unexplained phenomena. As he talked, his eyes darted around the room, skimming over the other patrons. We've got lights in the sky most nights, and folks here don't just chalk it up to the weather balloons or late flights. There's talk of UFOs, landing crafts, entities from other dimensions. And who's to say they're wrong? Maybe this murder wasn't the handiwork of a man at all. Maybe we're looking at extraterrestrial enforcement. He paused to sip his beer, his gaze setting on the dark window where the wind was now a gale, thrashing against the glass with the fury of a caged beast. And then there's the talk of the woods. They're not just mysterious beasts out there, but spirits, old and vengeful. There's a belief among the locals here that we're under some kind of surveillance by them above. Or maybe it's the government. Or perhaps it's both. Maybe they're in cahoots. It's hard to say which would be worse. The conversation took a deeper dive into the realm of the arcane as Judd brought up the local lore of occult practices, rambling on about rituals performed in the dead of night, deep within the woods. Some say there's a cult in town, worshippers of the unknown, trying to summon something they shouldn't be. Could be they stirred up something that took issue with our recently departed friend. It was then that our musings were abruptly interrupted by a raucous shout from across the bar. A man known to the townsfolk as Sailor Pete staggered to his feet to continue his sermon, but thankfully his first mate Shelley pulled him back into his seat. The captain's face flushed with the wind's bite, or perhaps it was just too much whiskey. From his seat, the old sailor shouted, "Storm's brewing! And not just any storm, no, sir! It's them! They're coming!" His words were then swallowed by a deafening clap of thunder. The lights, for a moment, threatened to surrender to the darkness as they blinked violently, teasing the void, but clawing back into the dim glow of safety at the last possible second. A ripple of unease ran through the patrons, their words dying on their lips as they listened to the rain battering the roof like muffled gunfire. And then, out of the heavy silence, Pete's laughter rolled out, a deep, hearty guffaw, easing the tension somewhat. Leaving the tavern's dubious warmth, I bid Judd farewell. The wind was beginning to pick up even more, with its icy fingers almost like a warning sign. The cobble streets of Moonset glistened under the sporadic glow of flickering lampposts, casting long, dancing shadows in the growing breeze. I pulled my collar tighter against the chill, quickening my pace as the comforting laughter and warmth of the tavern faded into the night behind me. The quaint facades of the town's shops blurred into a dreary wash of grays and muted colors as I made my way to my modest abode on the edge of town. Each snap of a twig underfoot punctuated the night's hushed symphony with a sharp staccato, amplifying the unease tightening in my chest. As I quickened my pace along the cobblestones, a fierce clap of thunder roared through the town like a lion. It made me think of the old Bible verse, 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. And tonight, the devil was hungry. The lanterns above flickered, their lights struggling against the force of nature, and then darkness swallowed everything. And for a heartbeat, the only sounds were the whistling winds and the distant rumble of the storm. In this disorienting blanket of night, there came a ghastly scream. A sharp, piercing cry that cut through the thick air and echoed down the streets. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a distress call that chilled the blood and seemed to almost gurgle with horror. And then, almost as suddenly as that they had extinguished, the lights flickered back to life, stuttering at first before steadying into a continuous glow. The return of light brought a momentary relief, but the shadows now seemed deeper, more menacing, as if they had somehow drawn strength from their brief dominion of the town. As the lights steadied, the door of the Wailing Banshee slammed open with a violent burst. The tavern patrons spilled out into the streets in a panicked wave, their faces painted with raw, unfiltered terror. In the midst of the torrent of humanity was Shelley, Sailor Pete's steadfast first mate, a man known for his unflappable nature, now staggering wildly, clutching at his throat as if invisible hands were squeezing the life from him. He stumbled forward a few paces, and then collapsed under the rain-slick cobblestones with a guttural gasp that silenced the crowd. And that's when salt water began to froth at his lips, spilling under the stones in an eerie echo of sea foam. How could salt water fill a man's lungs on dry land miles away from the ocean? The crowd drew back as I approached, my heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and dread. Kneeling beside him, I noticed something odd protruding from the dead man's mouth, and with a hesitant hand I reached out and pulled at the object. It was a long strand of seaweed, slick and glistening under the flickering street lamps, an impossible anomaly in the middle of our landlocked misery. The sight of it only deepened the horror that gripped the onlookers. Shelley's eyes were wide, staring into nothingness, his face a mask of confusion and terror. A woman's scream pierced the night as she fainted, her body limp as she fell into Sailor Pete's ready arms. The air was somehow thick with the smell of salt water. The crowd murmured and shuffled. The fear was palpable as they tried to make sense of the impossible scene before them. The sudden appearance of seaweed seemed to unleash something primal in Sailor Pete. His usual drunken bluster transformed into raw panic as he stood wide-eyed and pointing at the lifeless body of his first mate. "The StormLung! The StormLung are coming!" he bellowed, his voice cracking under the strain of his terror. The crowd around him shifted uneasily, murmuring amongst themselves, trying to offer comfort to Pete while keeping a wary distance from Shelley's dead body, which was still leaking salt water. Like it or not, Pete's warning hung ominously in the rain-drenched air. Amidst the confusion, my gaze was drawn across the street to Ellie Tink's Curious Emporium, a strange place with a strange owner. Through the rain-streaked windows of the Emporium, I caught the briefest glimpse of a figure shrouded in the dim, flickering light inside. As our eyes met, the figure, a silhouette against the clutter of mysterious artifacts and unsettling sculptures, hastily yanked the curtains closed. "What or whom is StormLung?" I muttered under my breath, the name echoing Sailor Pete's cryptic outcry. With the scene outside the tavern door still churning, I crossed the street, my shoes splashing through the puddles. The door to Ellie Tink's shop creaked ominously as I pushed it open, the bell above giving a plaintive, solitary ring. Tink's creations stared down from their perches, faces twisted in expressions of silent screams and wide-eyed terror, each capturing a frozen moment of dread. The shadows cast by the flickering lights made the figures seem to almost twitch, imbuing them with a lifelike quality that sent a shiver down my spine. As I stepped inside the shop of curiosity, I felt the weight of countless unseen eyes upon me, as if the sculptures of Tink's were beckoning me to come in. Time to pay a visit to Eleanor Tink, I thought, my resolve hardening with each step. The mystery of the StormLung and its possible ties to the eerie occurrences in Moonset seemed to be deepening, drawing me into its vortex. Whom or what was StormLung? This was the solitary question on my mind, and somehow I had a feeling it wanted me to find the answer. Marley Grim, the Moonset Gazette.